Well, hello there.
Hello, hello. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good as well. If I remember correctly, you sent me the email and I said that, we can pick up your KOL point so you sent 3 points, right? And the middle one was about KOLs because that's one important area
Sure.
where dentists need to be aware of what companies are looking for when they engage with key opinion leaders. And then on the company end, what has your experience been? Maybe the achievements and the pitfalls of some companies and their strategic approaches when it comes to engagement with KOLs. Maybe we can also talk about expectation setting. That was there too much expected or was there too little expected? And what were your experiences when it comes to the KOL world and engagement with product companies and how that ideally should work out and how one should approach these conversations. So how does that sound for a discussion point today?
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Just kidding. Sounds great. Sounds fantastic.
Okay, super. So let me start here. Key opinion leaders is the easiest catchphrase or keyword for me to capture people's attention in the dental world, regardless of which side I'm talking to. If I'm talking to a clinician who's been remotely interested in expanding their careers into the corporate product space, the moment you say the word KOL, they're like, excuse me? Yes, please keep talking. And then if you go to the companies and you go like, hey, we have the largest collection of KOLs spread across 23 countries globally, they all stop drinking their coffees and they're like, excuse me, who are you? So it's clearly working out, at least to get those ears, up and running. So I'm curious to learn you. First of all, let's start with your introduction. Tell us a bit about who you are, what your career progression has been, what your areas of expertise are, so that all the members in the pool and anybody who's watching this gets to know you a little bit more. And then we'll jump into the discussion. So go ahead.
Sure. I'll be brief, although it's over 30 plus years, but I'll be brief. My experience spans executive leadership along with commercial execution and strategic planning. And so I could stop there, but there's a lot underneath that. But essentially what I have done over the course of my 30 plus years in dental is I have brought products to market. I have built brands. I have been at the very beginning of some startups and brought them into the market and brought a message into the market that no one's ever heard of before, and done pretty much all the things that go on that are underneath that are required to do that. And then the topic of the day, of course, is thought leadership. And thought leadership in every one of those efforts over all of those decades, thought leadership has played a crucial role in supporting not only early stage product development or even product ideation, but also all the way through to proper commercial execution and launch and growth. And so I like to think that I've got some experience around this subject and this topic. I guess we'll find out after the conversation is over. We'll find out if I really do or not.
I'm going to start the timer right now for your quiz.
Perfect.
Okay, so when it comes to your vast experience, so I'm also assuming that you've not just worked with startups, but probably larger size dental corporates as well. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. I spent 20 years of my experience in dental was with a very large company. It was originally called Cybron Dental. And then we were acquired by Danaher, which is obviously a much larger company. And so I experienced everything from being part of Cybron Dental, which ultimately was a publicly held company, to then being acquired by a larger publicly held company and integrating their tool set. I've also worked for family-run dental companies before. I ran the North American business for a family-run dental company that was based out of Australia. And I've also been part of 3 startups and also a a private equity-owned company as well. So
Got it.
all over the place.
So when it comes to let's start with the smaller, younger companies, right? Let's start with startups. And my expertise also comes from this SME startup world. And what I've noticed as a clinician slash clinical regulatory, marketing professional is the moment you enter these spaces, first of all, you don't get to see a lot of clinicians in-house. It's a whole lot of engineers, a whole lot of PhDs, very, very strong in their own area of subject matter expertise because they're very well researched in that area. And now they're trying to take that concept and they're trying to mold it into an application which is used in the dental space. That's usually what you get to see the moment you step into the startup world. And the interesting thing is everybody's trying really, really hard to show that they're on top of it. But the reality is the more you dig in, they all need a little bit of support when it comes to understanding the clinical side of things. And how has your experience been dealing with startups? What are the most common areas when it comes to KOL engagements, or even just business? Where would you say that they need the most support to get that idea from just a concept in the head into an actual physical product into the clinician's hands?
Right. Well, and I think you've touched on probably, if we talked about nothing else today, I think this topic right here could be highly instructional for people who are listening to this. And by that, I mean that, for every great idea that we've seen that comes to market, there are hundreds, if not thousands or more of ideas that never get to market that are probably just as good, but they don't engage. They don't engage the founders, the inventors, the engineering team, the chemical team, whatever the leadership of that startup. They for some reason, and I think we usually know what it is, right? It's the not invented here or don't tell me that my baby's ugly kind of scenario, right? For whatever reason, those included, they don't have this passion, this appetite to engage with thought leadership or the market in general. And it's not uncommon. I see it every week now in the consulting role. I see it every week now because people will come to me and say, hey, what do you think? And one of the very first questions I ask is, well, let's talk about what you've done in terms of market research to prepare for this. And what have you heard? What have you seen that has told you that this is a need that you're meeting? And you've got to search for, when I'm talking to them, I'm looking to hear that they've engaged with the clinical community, that they've spoken to people that have insight, that have used all the different products in the market, that they're sitting in the chair, and that they have really good clinical experience. And whether it be, and this isn't just a product, right? This could be a software, it could be a service, it could be any of those things. And because if they don't find a way to get comfortable putting themselves out there and risking whatever they're going to hear back from these, in this case, that would be an early stage thought leader too, right? Because they've engaged people that are wet fingered dentists or hygienists or practitioners. If they don't do that, then there's a very high chance of failure later on. You can't re-engineer something later to success. Almost never, I shouldn't say can't, but it almost never happens if you don't start early on, long before the thing has a heartbeat or a pulse with the clinical community. And that level of feedback, that you're receiving there, and the questions that you're asking there are often very different than what you're asking later when you've gone through a few toll gates or stage gates of development, and now it's further on. And those are very different questions. And organizations, some organizations do this well, but it's hard. It's a hard ask for a startup to be able to do that well.
And it's interesting because usually the reason why it's not being done could be one of two or three options. One is, well, we reached out to the best researcher in this field and we pitched the idea to him in said conference or whatever, whenever they met, however they met, and he gave us a very good answer, and we're very confident that this is exactly what the dental world needs in the United States, which is our first preferred market, and then in Europe. And then that's usually option number one. Option number two is they don't have access to a whole bunch of day-to-day clinicians. And they're kind of dependent on the senior leadership. So when I say senior, board level, because they're the ones who have the network and the contacts with the KOLs, et cetera, from their extensive experience. So they're kind of dependent on who this person knows is who they know. And that's kind of where the buck ends. And the focus is on growth. The focus is on, we need to get to this milestone, which is development focused, because it's an engineering team, it's R&D driven.
Right.
And then it's like, okay, we have enough input, let's just get back to doing, right? And I don't completely disregard either option, because they're both good. But I think if we're able to insert into that some kind of accessibility to day-to-day clinicians, or some kind of strategy which allows them that access, then I think having the third last point would be, do you have the guts to do it? Because that's the third place where I usually see a lot of people, well, we're okay, we spoke to them. There's a hidden fear, which people are not able to fully commit or, release into the world. And that's the beauty of a good consultant, a good support provider, where your job is to step in and say, well, here, for example, your job, you're the strategic guru. So your job would be to ease them into this idea of, let's just do this, it's okay. And my job from the pool that we've created is to then give that resource to them, that, okay, here you go. Here's a whole bunch of clinicians. Who do you need? That's how I usually approach it. It's like, how many clinicians do you need? Which part do you need it in the world? Leave the procurement to us. That's our job. But please, please, please get that input in. It's better to do it than to not do it.
Yeah, for sure. And you and I've talked about this previously. We've talked about and this is what I love about what you're doing, because this aspect of having access, providing access to companies, whether it be startup or otherwise, having access to thought leadership, clinical thought leadership around the world is a unique resource that most companies wouldn't be able to do on their own, first of all, at least to any kind of scale. But also, you and I've spoken about this before, if we can get them past I should ask the market. If we can get them past, okay, I need to be okay with what I hear, because I might not hear everything I like to hear. We also have to educate them on not introducing bias into that discussion, right? Not introducing bias into the queries, and I think this is an area, also where you're providing guidance and service and direction, because you can bring them all the way to that table, put in front of them great clinicians. But if the questions are hugely biased, or if they're not actually germane to the topic and they're just checking off the boxes, that's not going to do them any good either. And I think that's, something that's that's mixed into the DNA here of what you're doing, which I think shouldn't be understated, right? It's super important.
Absolutely. And I personally felt that when I worked in this space. Of course, my experience is limited in the sense of number of years. But when you go through a certain pattern over and over again, regardless of who you're talking to or which company you're talking to, you kind of get a track of, okay, it looks like it's in this direction. Let's just create the solution here. And you're absolutely right. My very passionate response, and I get very, very passionate on these calls when I'm talking to early stage startups, which is, oh my God, please let me help you write the right questions, because I'm going to bring in the clinical input, and your engineering driven questions are what you know best. I don't know that part, but let me insert a few clinically relevant questions to bring the balance into the whole structure, so that we don't just talk about, is this a feature you want? We're going to talk about, how many patients do you think you can treat more if you actually have the solution? Is it going to make an impact on your day-to-day practice? That's the question that has equal relevance, if not more, right?
Oh, no question, no question about it. And this aspect of digging into that, because you really have to understand if you're solving a problem, or if you're just offering another solution to that is already exists out there. And if very often thought leaders will, again, this is why it's important what you're doing, because you have to calibrate the thought leaders as well. Because I have seen countless KOLs. I've been in rooms where we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to have events, and we bring them in from all over the country, sometimes all over the world, and we put them in a very expensive venue, and we spend days with them to work on things and ask them questions and get insights from them. But the danger in some of that is when you get some of these KOLs will say, well, listen, I can make anything work, so just put it in my hands and I can make it work. And that's being helpful in their eyes. That's being helpful. That's later. It's okay later when we get it done. Yeah, I do want you to make it work in your hands. But right now, what I want you to do is I really want you to tell me if this thing is going to solve a problem that exists, or if it's just the same of something that you've already seen. And that's the critical tipping point right there. And so you have to kind of calibrate the thought leaders too when you're engaging with them, so they know what their job is.
Yeah, you need honest feedback. And the way that I proposed it to the people I work with is the way we do it is that we're not going to tell the participants anything about who you are, what your future goals are as a company. We're going to keep it anonymized. The data will be given to you with basic demographic data. And what ends up happening is, because the dentist is just there for the survey, right? They're just there because they have a very good clinical practice. They have very good experience. We've catered to their profiles. We brought the right people for you as a participant. And we're not expecting anything out of them other than a great survey result, right? And we kind of guide them in the pre-prep process on, here's what is expected. Here's what the company looks forward to receiving from you. And that's pretty much it. We're not prepping them too much and getting their hopes high in any direction whatsoever. We just keep it normal. We're like, hey, we really love your raw, honest feedback on this. And at the end of it, what ends up happening is everybody's name is removed. So you have participant 1, participant 2, 3, 4. That's all that the company gets to see. And it's so funny because sometimes I'm going to tell you the insider information here. I see some profiles and those CVs are so amazing. And I'm like, this person is amazing at what they do. Who is this dentist? And you read their answers and they're could be good, might like it better. Very simple. This feature is good. Thank you very much. And then sometimes the profiles who are relatively okay, maybe they've not even been practicing for that long, but their amount of knowledge comes through in their answers. Yeah. And you go like, wow, participant number 3 is really killing it. And that's your KOL. That's your KOL.
Yeah. And I believe it. I believe that you do see that kind of weird variance, right? Where someone you would think would be providing this incredibly deep insight, and it could be a number of factors, right? It could be a matter of their work day, how busy they are, the level of interest they may have in that particular thing that they're looking at. I have found, and I'm sure you found this as well, that when they see something that they really, really can get their teeth into, pardon the pun, that usually energizes the conversation and you get much richer feedback. But I've seen that. I've seen what you're talking about. The everyday dentist, suddenly, just out of the blue, this person that, no one has heard of, or they've never been asked. Sometimes it's, hey, I've never actually been asked these questions. And now that you're asking me, I'm going to give you all sorts of feedback. And they're out there.
Absolutely. And it's important to give companies that resource that, okay, now you can engage us. Here's how you get access to them. That's the goal of the business pool, right? But let's not move the conversation to the bigger companies, because it's a whole different ballgame when you're working in well-established 100-year-old companies who've been doing this for long enough. They have their strong supporters. Having said that, it still seems to be common practice where they're still engaging with 2 or 3 KOLs tops for any new updated version of an existing product, or maybe even a new product idea. Their approach is that these guys have supported us for the last, 20 years. We're going to be reliant on them. So how do you think it's equal in terms of weightage, that this should be an exercise on both ends of the spectrum, or is it different between a small company and a bigger company when it comes to getting this market data?
Yeah, I think, we could talk for hours on that particular question, I think. But, at a broad level, you're absolutely right. I mean, a larger company that's been around for a long time has both the resources to engage with thought leaders at a more personal level. And I mentioned earlier, that I've been part of, I've had a team that has built very large events where we spent a lot of money to do this, and these KOLs look forward to it every year. And that's a different type of relationship than what we're talking about here. But they have resources, and so you would think sometimes that they would know better, right? Because they have those resources. Topic for another day. But they also have, as you mentioned, they have these long-standing relationships with some of these thought leaders. But there's danger in that, of course. There's some danger in the long-standing type relationship, because that's when you do get the responses like, hey, listen, I want to help you. I'm a thought leader that you've been working with me for years, and I've enjoyed great sponsorship, so I'm going to help you no matter what, right? Well, that's nice, and you want to leverage that alliance and that partnership at one point or another, but that's not what you and I are talking about today. What you and I are talking about today is, how do I make my product better? Does this product fit the need? Is this the right direction? And I want you to be painfully honest. That's the best relationship. So that universal truth exists, whether it be a small startup or it be a gigantic, mega country, gigantic beast of a company, right? But I think where what you do see with the larger companies is you do see a pretty extensive, if they're doing their jobs, if they have the right clinical affairs team built out properly, then what they're doing is they are scanning the market globally for the right thought leaders that appropriately meet the goals and the needs and the goals of whatever they're trying to bring to market, whether it be, a new introduction in a new vertical they're trying to expand their portfolio for the company, or they're trying to do an enhanced version of a line extension, or, add something to a really big category that they're already a part of. Sophisticated companies that have a sophisticated and intelligent approach to thought leadership will have a pretty extensive set of documentation and tracking funnels around that. And when I was in the larger organization, I had a team that helped manage this for the marketing effort, and they managed it through one lens. It was on product development. On another lens, it was go to market. And we may often will engage with different thought leaders for that front end, that early front end, rather than when we ultimately went to market. And as a result, you could imagine what that Excel sheet looked like. It had many tabs, it had a lot of names, it had areas of expertise and location, and where, what they were known for, where we could possibly partner with them. And so I think the difference between that startup and then that large company is that the larger company has the resources and the wherewithal, and they have people dedicated to this, so they can really go deep on it. I'm not saying you need that. You don't necessarily have to have that. I don't even think you want it as a startup, but there's if you're doing it right, if a large company is doing it right, then they are approaching their thought leadership with that level of depth and that level of complexity in order to fully extract the value out of who they're talking to. But that doesn't mean that they can do it themselves. Here's the thing, right? Here's the chasm, the gap that exists, and even in the largest companies, they still don't have this readily accessible pool all the time that is constantly changing. So you go back to we talked about what you're doing. What you're bringing is dynamic, and it evolves as the market evolves, as KOLs evolve, as clinicians evolve. If you can tap into that in your capacity, then you're constantly going to have a fresh set of eyes for whether it be a large company or a small company. And I think that's the important thing to state here is that they're going to need that, whether big or small, they're going to need that constantly refreshed view on the KOL pool that exists globally.
I agree. And another idea that I'll place to your point is clinicians have a different conversation behind closed doors. And I know that industry is very anxious of this. Oh, they talk behind closed doors. If they say something bad about me, oh my God, I'm going to die. My company's going to die. That's a huge fear. And it's so funny because usually we're just cracking jokes behind closed doors. Dentists love each other. We have a very good camaraderie amongst us. And it's a very lively group when we do speak behind closed doors. So having said that, here's the thing. When you have that list of KOLs, if you're a well-established company, the clinicians who are most likely to buy your products either have experience with your company, they're loyal to you already, right? And they're looking forward to your next whatever you're creating. But there's one issue that happens that I've seen behind closed door when doctors talk to doctors, which is, oh, yeah, I think that KOL is supporting that product for the 15th time. When you read studies, you get used to and you start identifying like doctors with brands, and good researchers, good, honest clinicians want to eventually see other people promoting the idea. They want to see other names pop up. They want to see someone else that they don't know kind of give their honest opinion. And when you have that list and when you engage with the same people over and over and over and over and over and over again, the clinical community goes into, oh yeah, that's what he does or she does. You know, oh yeah,
Yes.
that's the person who does that.
Oh, for sure. It's a risk. Yeah.
It's a risk there, and it's in the best interest of the whole dental community and the company creating these products to actually engage with people who might want to build their careers. Maybe they're somewhere at the starting stages of setting themselves up as a key opinion leader. You want slightly more younger blood to be involved because you are going to be selling it to slightly younger blood. Your KOL might be in their 40th year of clinical practice, but the person who's going to buy your product, you're trying to reach to the university kids. Tell me if that's wrong. Companies really want to get that young crowd in because then we make loyal people out of them. But you're using the 40-plus-year-old person who's by this point created a track record, either with that specific company, and now you're asking them, and a good, smart clinician, no matter what their age is, will say, yeah, but who else has tried? Is there like a doctor in Turkey that I don't know of who's actually tried this thing? Like, you know, and that's another great way to engage with the pool, which is, you know, we can give you access to those upcoming profiles who want to become key opinion leaders. So my last question before we end this conversation to you is, let's talk to the clinicians now. Let's talk to the dentists who actually do want to become, you know, key opinion leaders. What would you say companies are looking for in these profiles who want to engage in this process of setting themselves up, opening their careers, opening alternate revenue channels to their clinical practice, and discovering the corporate space? What advice would you give them? Because every dentist wants to become a KOL. I'll tell you that. They'll look forward to it.
Well, you know, listen, this is a great question. And I think, and you set it up well, because there are, you know, certainly there are plenty of thought leaders out there, or doctors out there, who are watching the thought leadership pool. And there is a point, there is a break point where they say, oh, well, sure, of course, this person is talking about this product from this company. They've been talking about this company for years, right? And I get that. And it's interesting that I've seen things change. You know, over the years, I've seen things change. That used to actually have value in that regard, where doctors who were even coming out of school recognized the more seasoned KOLs, the ones that had been on the podium already for 20 years. They would want to know in practice, they would want to know, well, what does so-and-so say about it? What does so-and-so say about it? I want to know. But it's different now. It's different now. I mean, the dynamics of dentistry, right, of course, with all of it have completely sort of turned that upside down in this particular area. Because you're coming out of school, very often you're going into a DSO, right? You're getting into a structure where you're not involved in all of the decisions within the practice. And as such, you may not be attuned to this particular area that you and I are talking about. And we know that's almost half of dentistry, at least in the US, right? And so the other aspect too that you mentioned is, what is someone in Turkey talking about? Well, you know, obviously in the US, for good or for bad, and I get to say it because I live in the US and I'm a United States citizen, I get to say it, that you know, they're not always interested in what a doctor in Turkey is saying, as much as maybe a doctor in Lithuania might
Europe.
be interested in a doctor in Turkey, right? And so, and we know that to be true. So there's some nuances there that both companies and doctors who want to be KOLs should be aware of. Mm-hmm. I think, you know, to me, my experience has been over the years that thought leaders very often emerge because of the effort that they've done on their own part. Yeah. And it comes from really studying the market, studying the research, finding companies that they really believe in terms of product performance, or believe in the way that company's going to market, And usually what happens, not always the case, but very often what happens is these doctors will reach out to either the leadership at the top of the organization or somewhere in the decision-making pool of the company, and they will make themselves known. And they will make themselves known for something in particular. In other words, they will say, I have this practice, or I have these practices. I am really good at this. Here is some work that I've done on my own. And here is how I present myself to my local study club. These are the things that I'm passionate about. I love this product that you have, or these products that you have. I've been using them for years, and they fit perfectly in my practice because of the way I am. And I want to share that with others. And I also want to help you do more of that because I really like what you're doing already as an organization. I mean, I've had this happen a lot where people, and I can go all the way back to when I was a rep carrying a bag, and I was in a high-rise complex in downtown Chicago, and overlooking Oak Street Beach, and I think you probably know where that is, right? And this doctor who I was just selling, I sold them Optibond, and I was a fresh rep, and I sold them Optibond, and the doctor turned to me and says, you know what, I really want to work more closely with your company. Can you help me navigate that? Because I'm teaching at Loyola, which is no longer a dental school, but then it was. So I'm teaching at Loyola, I've been for years. Look at my work. And he started showing me all the stuff that he was doing. And first of all, the work was beautiful. And the way that he articulated how he did it, the thought process behind it, it was pretty obvious that this person should be teaching others. And as we sit here today, this is a very, very, very well-known KOL that speaks not only in the US, but speaks globally, and has done it for decades now. And it all started when I called on him in a dental office, and I connected him with the right people, and we started having him lecture for us. And I think it does require a proactive effort on the part of the doctor who wants to be considered a thought leader. It requires a proactive part on effort and thought process on their part to really understand and decide who they are, what they want to stand for, what they want to be known for, and be able to showcase that to companies. And companies will pick up on that because they need that.
There's so many good points you made there, Leo. Number one, I love talking, just a side note, I love talking about the role of good sales reps in building that relationship for clinicians to companies. And it's rare to come across great sales reps. So that's a great conversation topic for one of our sessions, into how clinicians should engage with their sales rep compared to what they usually do, which is, at least in Asia and the rest of the world, which is, I don't have the time, I have like 2 minutes to speak your thing, and then just go. And you're like, oh my God, come on, give them the basic respect. It's one of the most difficult jobs out there. So for me, when I was back in my clinical days, I used to give them time. I used to respect them because I know how hard it is to do what they do. But then also to build that route into the company through that relationship that you build with your reps. So that's a great subject on its own. So if I hear you correctly, the key points would probably be that if you are a clinician who wants to step into the world of becoming a thought leader or becoming kind of at the forefront of a specific kind of research or technology, then you would want to be out there, show that you're interested, start engaging with the people that you already know in your network who are associated with these companies. Tell them exactly what you want from them. Because just as if you just say, I'm a dentist who likes your product, that's just someone in the post-market space putting a massive check. Can you please fill the survey and give us 5 stars? That's what they'll hear. And you have to make it very clear to them, yes, I'll give you 5 stars, but could you put me in touch with so-and-so because I actually want to present your technology in this conference. Can I test it? Is it possible? How can I get hold of your product?
Yes. I think you've characterized it, what I was saying, properly. With one thing I would add is that it's important that they know who they are. And I'm talking about the clinician now. It's important that they know who they are and what they can bring to that organization. And the reason I say that is because if that engagement, let's just take the example of being a rep. So when I listened to him starting to talk, I realized, holy cow, this doctor can help me. This doctor can help me here. in my territory. I could deploy
Yes.
this doctor in a variety of areas that can help me sell more product. And if the doctor, the clinician, can get someone energized in the organization around who they are and what they can bring to the table, then they will listen. And companies that don't want to listen to that, then that's not a company I want to work with anyway. But the thing the message I would send to a doctor, to a clinician, a practicing dentist who is interested in being a thought leader, the message I would send to them is, do not be afraid to make that engagement. Do not be afraid, because that conversation is going to be met with open arms and open ears and an open appetite, because companies are always looking for people that want to align with them in this regard, over this whole topic that we've been talking about here. And so if you're a doctor and you want to speak for a company or write for a company or support that company either on early stage development or late stage commercialization, then there are plenty of companies out there that would love to talk to you. And all you have to do is be good at what you do, be very, flush with ideas, and have a lot of energy and information and insights to share.
Yeah.
And if you're willing to do that, and willing to do it within the construct of proper questioning, right? So we don't have bias.
There
we
you
don't
go.
introduce
That's
bias,
the most
right?
important bit.
If you're
Yeah.
willing to do all of that, then companies will want to talk to you. And I think that's people need to know that.
People need to know that. And the flip side of that dynamic is what I also try and do, and what I coach all the members on in the pool, is you also need to understand how devices get made, because that's a massive gap in knowledge. So we've actually built that. I'm launching that next week. So that's why I've been really busy this week, by the way. So I'm really messed up with my emails, but we're launching this program just so that, first of all, you need to understand what's happening on the other end, so that you don't get too excited putting every idea on the table, knowing that 0.1% is likely to get adopted. So why waste all that energy? You need to know exactly what to say at the right point. And the way you know that is to understand how a company actually functions, how a product actually gets developed. So we're trying to upskill them first by teaching them, make them better advisors, better KOLs that way. And I would dare say this because I'm at launch stage, so I'm very excited about this. I would say the next level to being a KOL is being a premium dental advisor, because what KOLs don't know is that side of the equation. We're actually teaching them, this is how it's done. Now you can really have smart conversations. So it's probably the next level to being just a KOL.
It's a great idea and a great service that you're doing, because they need that, and they'll pick up on it quickly. They'll understand the moment you show that roadmap, right? What it really looks like on the other side, then they can adjust easily.
Yeah, and I think the smart ones, the ones who already have that inherent skill of presentation, talking, that's why you want to engage in this part of your career. All that, the only missing link is how do you speak, how do you engage with who you're talking to on the other side of the table? It could be R&D department, you talk like this to them. You're talking to someone in sales, you talk to them like this. You have to build that relationship first, right? So this is awesome, Leo. Let's take on that sales part next week. I want to learn more about, how has your journey been when it comes to sales? Here's a preview of next session. I've noticed that a lot of companies are very heavy when it comes to diverting resources to the sales department. And sometimes the clinical and the other guys kind of feel like, how come sales gets all the money? And, marketing is also there. So let's talk about those dynamics in our next session, where how much resources are actually being put in what department? And let's get some insider thoughts on, is it the right thing to do? Where should money actually be going in today's day and age, which is very digital, very marketing? AI is coming up now. And where should companies be putting their buck to get the best results for them? How does that sound?
Great conversation. Sounds like a great conversation.
There we go. So we've set up the stage for the next one.